Probably one of the more exciting things you can do as a gardener is to produce your own plants. And if you grow Clematis, the traditional way of increasing your stock is by softwood cuttings. And in today's video, I'll take you through the process, the traditional way of doing it, and show you a more modern and, in my view, a more effective way of doing it. Taking softwood cuttings is the traditional way that most gardeners use to increase their stock or to rejuvenate an aging plant. Cuttings can be successfully taken from spring until September, but May and June are the peak months when plants are growing strongly and producing lots of young stems. To be successful with softwood cuttings, it is helpful to have some rudimentary knowledge of botany. Plants are a complex mixture of interdependent chemical processes and cells. Roots, in addition to anchoring the plant, extract water and nutrients from the soil and later store food for the plant. Stems transport water and nutrients up the plant to where they're needed, and the leaves capture light, which is the energy source for food manufacture. They also regulate heat by shedding water in the form of vapour. So when we take a cutting, we create significant trauma and disruption to the plant. The stem, where the cutting has been taken, must have a sufficient supply of water for the stem to support the leaves while the plant cells grow new roots. If leaves on the cutting don't receive sufficient water, they will wither and die. And if the atmosphere that you put a cutting in is too humid, they're likely to be attacked by a fungus such as botrytis, and the cutting will also die. So taking softwood cuttings is a balancing act. In effect, the gardener becomes the temporary roots because it is up to us to deliver water in the right quantities. It has no other way of securing water. Last piece of botany, I promise. Plants lose water during the day, so selecting a plant that you want to take cuttings from, make sure you water it very well the night before and take your cuttings as early as you can the next morning, and that way you'll be optimizing your chances of success. In general, young plants provide better cutting material. They're very willing to root, but you can also try taking cuttings from atrogenes, alpinas and macropatellas. And we're standing in front of Blue Dancer, which, as you see, is producing, as well as a fabulous display of flower, it's producing some long non-flowering stems. And I'll use some of these as examples of cutting material. I'll take some of the stems to demonstrate. There's a nice long one and another one there. Let's see what we've got. Let's look at the first one to start with. You see how thick that stem is, and it's not very flexible. That one's a bit more flexible, and that's even more. The end one is probably too flexible. It's a bit like Goldilocks, isn't it? Which one's just right? But I'll take some from all of these and then we can judge. That one I've cut off just below a node, and that is too short. Although, having said that, although we take cuttings internodally, there is nothing to stop you taking nodal cuttings. they're just not very practical. There, that's a nodal cutting with a node at the bottom and a node at the top. What you would do is to plunge that into rooting material. I use 50% sharp sand, 50% potting compost, but you would need a very long plant pot, because you would put it into the plant pot so that that upper node is just out of the compost. So you'd probably need a Clematis at least 2-litre pot to put that in. It is possible to put them around the sides. Now, with all cuttings, to give the leaves a chance, you remove one of the leaves, and that reduces the amount of water loss the plant potentially is going to have. I'll just stand that into some water for now, but the other cuttings we'll take traditionally. So here we have a long stem, and I'll cut it back to about 5 centimetres with a sharp knife. That's not very sharp. And then you cut it again above the node and remove one of the leaves. It doesn't matter which. And that is a traditional Clematis cutting. Now, some people, when the stems are slightly thicker, just to encourage roots, they just scrape the bottom of the stem and take the outer layer off, or just put a slit in it, and that does encourage the formation of roots. But again, I'll put that in water for the time being. Now, this next section is a bit more pliable, so again about 5 centimetres above the nodes. And the nodes, perhaps I should have explained, are the two buds which form in the axis between the stem and the leaf. So even though we've taken the leaf off, there is still a node there and a node there. Again, I'll scrape the bottom and put it in water. Now, this last piece is probably the best piece of all. It's more flexible. We certainly don't want to have it too flexible. That cuts really easily. So we'll take the stem off above one of the leaves, and I'll select the smaller leaf. Probably don't need to scrape the end, but I will, just to be consistent. And I'll put that in water for the time being. Now, the other cutting that I took off the same plant, those last two sections, probably that one is the best. So I'll discard the bottom one, take off a leaf, cut it just above the node, and that's quite flexible, but I think that would make a good cutting. I think this top piece here is too flexible. One rule of thumb is when you push it into the rooting medium, if it bends too much, then it's too young. Now, one of the advantages of supermarket plants is that these are probably about a year-old plant. And what many of the commercial people do is to sell these for growing on. Now, assuming that this is about a year old, this material, particularly up here, should be ideal for cuttings. And I'm told that many commercial nurseries would grow a plant until it's about a year old, then take the stem off like that, and they would grow this on for another year and sell it. But in the meantime, they've availed themselves of 1 or 2 more plants. So I'll take these as cuttings as well. That stem is a bit too hard, so I will ignore that, and I will cut about 5 centimeters down on these 2 stems here. Above a node, and again that's probably a very good cutting. The stem is just pliable, it hasn't gone too hard. Now that's why they're called softwood cuttings as opposed to hardwood cuttings. You can have semi-ripe cuttings when this gets a bit harder, but these softwood cuttings should take reasonably easily. Now we've got quite a few in there, so I'll just get rid of this material and show you how to plant them.